Lumos.
Let's pull out our wands and light the tips, but we're not blowing smoke. We're here to illuminate. Let's break down this plan that the trio have. All right. There's someone in the school who has opened the Chamber of Secrets, and now the Muggleborns at the school are in danger. Our little trio suspects that the culprit could possibly be Draco Malfoy because he's a bully. His family has a reputation for being blood purists and Voldemort supporters. He's in Slytherin, the evil house who made the chamber in the first place, and he screams mudblood at people on a regular, in public. At 12 years old, their logic is fairly sound, even if it does lack some nuance. They're not crazy for thinking this way. After all, he is the most openly blood racist kid that our characters have encountered. We know this because we only really encounter the people Harry encounters, and we haven't met a kid that fit the bill better than Draco to this point. But let's be real. These are also kids. They're quick to suspect the person they don't like the most, and being the villain when shit goes down is immediately where they're going to point their finger. That kid's mean to me, must be evil kind of logic. I would argue that Draco being so vocal about his support of whoever has just opened the chamber would indicate that he didn't. The person likely wouldn't want to be caught, right? So they would probably keep quiet and not shout racial slurs at people and draw suspicion. But again, they're 12. So the plan is to interrogate Draco about it. But they don't know how they're ever going to get him alone and how they would get him to tell them anything about what they want to know. They're not friendly, so he wouldn't talk to any of them directly. And they're not, master manipulators. They're not trained in interrogation, and none of them have the truth serum. The name's escaping me. Somebody make fun of me for not being able to think of that potion off the top of my head. But anyways, Hermione has a plan. Of course, Hermione has a plan. And Hermione has come up with this plan to disguise themselves. Maybe he will confide in them then. To do this, they'll use Polyjuice Potion, and they'll turn into Slytherin students who are close to Draco, and that he would trust. Crabbe and Goyle for the boys, and who cares for Hermione? Just a Slytherin girl we'll learn about later. It's going to take a month to make the potion, and they'll have to steal the ingredients, or at least some of the ingredients, from Snape. And they'll have to grab a bit of the people that they'll turn into. The story likes to use hair. And that's the plan, in a nutshell. What could go wrong? I don't even know that I would call this a solid plan. I think as Ron would say it, it's completely mental. Question. Before we get into the merits of the plan, do we think that Dumbledore is already aware of the plan at this point? I think I would consider that he might. They had to get a signed permission slip to get this particular book from the library. That's a paper trail. Would it be crazy to think that when an underage student does this, the headmaster is informed? Who and what book? At this point, Dumbledore knows and wants, he fully intends for Harry to play the hero. So he's got to suspect that Harry's already trying to be heroic in some way. He's planning something, or at least Hermione's planning something, and Harry's going to go along with it. I think if you listened back to season 1 of this podcast, Dumbledore was very much in asset collection mode and testing Harry out during that book, and he was, I think, pleasantly surprised to find that he got 3 tiny heroes for the price of 1. And so at this point, he's probably thinking they are planning something of some sort. And if he's informed that they have this book, it's probably not a stretch to think that Dumbledore suspects what potion they might be after. Now, has Dumbledore memorized every potion in every book? Maybe, but probably not. But if he's already expecting that they'd be planning something, and then learns that they've gotten a restricted potion book, I don't know that it's too far of a reach for him to think Polyjuice would be a target recipe within it, especially with how much it ends up being used throughout the rest of the series. So I don't know. I don't even know that it matters, because whether Dumbledore suspects it or not, it doesn't make it a good plan. Hermione calls it the best they've got, and from the pages I've read, it's the only plan they've got. It's the only one they've even considered. So let's play a game. Are there other plans that they could have possibly tried? So the first one that comes to mind for me is ultimately where the book ends up going, is they could essentially go on offense, try to find the chamber secrets themselves. And if you can find the chamber, maybe you can catch the heir in the act of opening it, or at the very least find it and inform Dumbledore where it is to help him catch the culprit. They've narrowed in on Malfoy. They haven't considered any other potential suspects. Now they're going to waste a month on an elaborate ruse just to talk to one potential suspect. Going for the chamber, it could take a month, but it might get you to whoever the suspect actually is and widen your pool and increase the odds of actually finding them. Of course, we're pretending that 12-year-olds confronting the heir of Slytherin is a good thing in the first place, but I mean, that's what's got to go down, right? This is a kid's book. What other plans might there be? What if instead of trying to find the chamber, they just tried to find the person? Not try to figure out how to talk to Malfoy. And if they figure out that it's Malfoy along the way, great, grand, fantastic. Their immediate suspicion is correct. But why not try to go for whoever that person might be? They could look for clues and stake out the halls near where the message was written. It's not a stretch to think that it was written in that particular corridor for a reason, and that the person might return to it in some form or fashion. Maybe Harry does have the invisibility cloak. They could take turns. Just throwing it out there. Need some donuts for this stakeout. And we know, obviously in a reread, that it wouldn't take that long to see Ginny coming out of the bathroom with the basilisk in tow. And what if they did? What if they did go one of these routes? Whether it was going for the chamber themselves or just staking out the area, trying to figure out who might be returning to the scene of the crime. What if they found Ginny? How's that play out? You know, if it's Ron, he's jumping out. And then the question is, would Ginny be able to shake off Riddle's control when he does it? When he jumps out and she gets a good look at him and realizes, oh, that's my brother. Is she able to shake free? Or does Ron become the next victim? Pure blood or not, basilisks don't care. So what does Ron see the basilisk through? Anything? Does he get petrified, or does he look directly into the eyes? That got dark. Before it gets any darker, why don't we switch gears here and do some
divination?
It's time to highlight 4 moments in the chapter that foreshadow something to come in the future. 1. Ooh, look, powdered horn of a bicorn. Don't know where we're going to get that. Shredded skin of a boomslang? That'll be tricky too. Do you realize how much we're going to have to steal, Hermione? Shredded skin of a boomslang? That's definitely not in the student's cupboard. What are we going to do? Break into Snape's private stores? I don't know if this is a good idea. That's obviously two long quotes from the chapter just merged together and ends with exactly what they're going to do. They're going to develop a plan to break into Snape's cupboard and steal the ingredients that they need for this potion. But it's a solid plan. What could go wrong? Fireworks are coming. That's another foreshadow. If you know, you know. 2. This, said Dobby, plucking at the pillowcase. 'Tis a mark of a house elf's enslavement, sir. Dobby can only be freed if his masters present him with clothes, sir. The family is careful not to pass Dobby even a sock, sir, for then he would be free to leave their house forever. My Dobby needs some work, but again, that's a quote. It's Dobby explaining how the clothes rule for house elves even works, and it's a foreshadow to the end of this book, when Harry's able to trick Lucius Malfoy into giving Dobby a what? A sock. Which apparently Dobby's a seer, knowing that a sock is in his future, and Dobby will be free. A free elf. Shout out to our patron tier, the Free Elves. You want to check that out? Patreon.com/belatedbinge. 3. And now, at Hogwarts, terrible things are about to happen. Are perhaps already happening. And Dobby cannot let Harry Potter stay here now that history is to repeat itself. Now that the Chamber of Secrets is open once more. Okay, we should probably stop with the Dobby voice. But, again, we get the foreshadow that this is not the first time that the Chamber of Secrets has been opened. It absolutely has been opened now. It has been opened in the past, and history is somewhat going to repeat itself, and it's not safe. Terrible things are happening, going to happen, and are already happening. Pretty much Dobby's spot on the nose. This whole thing's on the nose. All of this is absolutely right. That's it. That's the foreshadow. All of this is 100% correct. 4. But Albus, surely who? The question is not who, said Dumbledore, his eyes on Colin. The question is how. And from what Harry could see of Professor McGonagall's shadowy face, she didn't understand this any better than he did. That's how our chapter ended, and it's a huge foreshadow. Because I don't know if we're meant to catch this in our first read. Obviously, we catch it in a reread. Dumbledore knows who has opened it. He doesn't know how. He's fully aware that Tom Riddle was the person who opened this the first time around. That's why he let Hagrid stay on. Well, I mean, I don't know that he necessarily let Hagrid be gameskeeper, like, immediately at whatever he was, 13, when he got expelled. But he kept in touch, and he let Hagrid come back and work at Hogwarts. Probably when he became headmaster is likely when that started. I don't know. There's probably a Potter No More article about it. It doesn't matter. He knew that Hagrid wasn't the one that opened the Chamber of Secrets the first time. He knew that it was Tom Riddle. He knows that Tom Riddle is the heir of Slytherin. So he knows that Tom Riddle is to blame for opening it now. But he doesn't realize how he could do it. To his knowledge, at this very moment, based on the conclusion of the last book, Voldemort is still a wisp of sorts. A soul, a free spirit in the world without a body, without a wand, without true power, So how could he re-enter the castle and go open the Chamber of Secrets? He doesn't know about the diary. He doesn't know about Ginny. He doesn't know how. But he already knows who. And that's why he doesn't suspect Harry in the slightest. Now, let's give away some
House points.
In true Hogwarts fashion, these points are completely subjective with no oversight and fully at my discretion. This week, I'm giving house points to Harry. Harry's getting 50. He's been through a lot in this whole ordeal, and he deserves the points. Hermione is getting 10 for getting them the book that they need and for formulating the plan in the first place, even if it isn't a great plan. Colin is getting 10 for trying to be nice to Harry and bring him grapes, and getting petrified for his troubles. That's rough. I'm not even sure 10's enough, but again, it's my call. Now I'm going to take away some house points. Dobby's losing 50 for trying to take Harry's head off with a bludger, and then not actually explaining shit when he showed back up to explain shit. It's super frustrating. And Lockhart is also losing 50 for using magic against a student without consent and removing all of the bones in Harry's arm. Idiot. I'll add these points up in my nerdy spreadsheet as soon as I create it, so that they can aid us in the end of this season's Bingy Awards episode. Before we go, we have to acknowledge the moments in the chapter that were utterly
Riddikulus.
Of course, it's not an episode of The Binge if we don't call out what didn't make any sense at all. And I've already complained about enough in this chapter, so I'm not going to go crazy here this time. Just quickly, all the Lockhart stuff is obviously ridiculous. All the stuff that I said earlier about no medical staff at Quidditch, and really the trio's plan's kind of ridiculous, and there's lots of ridiculousness happening. I also find it unlikely that Dumbledore didn't hear Dobby disapparate at the end of the chapter. Sure, of course, he's busy and preoccupied and all of that, but this is the most powerful and astute wizard alive who's on high alert after a student was attacked in the castle. I'm thinking he'd be hypersensitive to anything that could be thought of as a threat. And the crack of disapparition would qualify as a threat, since you can't apparate and disapparate in Hogwarts. Don't think that would have stood out a little bit? Maybe. I know his nose is crooked, but there ain't nothing wrong with his ears. Anyway, with that, we've reached the end of this episode of Belated Binge. As always, shout out to producer Jack, who I work like a dog. Remember to follow and subscribe to the show on whatever podcast player you're using right now. And if it supports a rating and review option, please leave one. You have no idea how helpful that can actually be. And if you're so inclined, check out the additional benefits available on patreon.com/belatedbinge. If you're reading along, next episode, we're covering Chapter 11 of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, The Dueling Club, with the hosts of For Fox's Sake. Until then, we'll see you next time on the Belated Binge Podcast. But Albus, surely who? The question is not who, said Dumbledore, his eyes on Colin. The question is, how? And from what Harry could see of Professor McGonagall's shadowy face, she didn't understand this any better than he did.